It's the last few days before Christmas, and if you still need some stocking stuff or ideas or gifts, you can head over to gfuel.com and my code ESPRESSO get you 30% off your entire order for the next couple of days. Offer expires soon, so if you're interested, check it out. The M4A1, the Odin, the MP5, the 725, 357 at one point, those are some meta weapons in Modern Warfare, meaning that they're used by a relatively large percentage of players in the game. Chances are you jump into a lobby, doesn't matter what of, you'll find players using those weapons and a few others almost exclusively. You know which ones they are, but what if you don't want to conform to those meta weapons? What if you want to do well with something that isn't any of those? Today I want to talk to you about 4 weapons that I believe are severely underrated and can be a ton of fun and naturally are absolute brutes when it comes to their force in game. As with other videos, none of this is of course as definitive, so do feel free to add or subtract anything from this list, and feel free to let me know your thoughts, what weapon you think is underrated in the game, and as well, maybe considering that subscribe button to stay up to date with all things Modern Warfare on a daily basis. But anyways, let's jump into it. Probably the first weapon that I want to talk about is one that admittedly I had quite a bit of fun with recently. What started as just a way to rank up for some camos has turned into a partial favorite. I wouldn't say that it's the very best weapon in the game, but it can certainly pack a punch with the right attachments and of course in the right hands. The Mark II is a lever-action, semi-automatic marksman rifle, and the name suits it pretty well. If you have an accurate snap or an accurate aim in general, this name will do well in your hands. One thing that I will say is that it will take a little bit of time to get used to it if you're used to rushing or running and gunning in any capacity. It's a lot more passive a weapon than, say, your M4, your AUG, your MP5, so naturally, you want to take your time with it a little bit more. You want to be a little bit more methodical, but that doesn't mean that you can't be in the thick of it sometimes. What you'll see in the background footage is likely some of the footage of when I was in high traffic areas in ground war and a lot of action around me, but we weren't putting ourselves directly in the range of say, immediate SMG trading gunfire. Instead, in this gameplay, we were up on the rooftops, which with everyone spawning around me at their home flag, and of course, underneath, it was something that there were definitely plenty of enemies that could take me out at any point, but given the accuracy, given the ability of the weapon, it worked out that we didn't die immediately. Overall, this thing gets really good with attachments. The base weapon's one-shot potential is relatively lower compared to what you may consider, but if you're accurate, you can hit those headshots, and then at that point, it's absolutely no problem. I don't think that I've encountered any headshot hit markers, and if I did, they were at extreme range, and even at that point, it's not something that I even noticed. I think that personally, Ground War is a great way to rank this up. Hardcore, of course, will do that as well, but you can maximize your loadout potential even further once you end up getting it ranked up, but that's completely up to you. End of the day, it was honestly a blast when it came down to playing with this, and again, adjusting my playstyle a bit, that was probably the biggest part that I had to do. Just be a little bit more passive, not try and jump into every single gunfight and challenge it, because even if I do trust my shot, I could still get a hit marker at some points. If I get a headshot, that's fantastic, but if I get a hit marker or miss my shot, chances are it wouldn't give me much time to react. It worked out to be a really good weapon in my hands whenever I played around with it from my experience, so even that base default of the weapon has some good potential. Rank that up, get some more attachments on it, and I think you can definitely thrive with this thing. One thing that I will say out of the 4 we'll talk about here today, this was probably the biggest shakeup in terms of my own gameplay experience and how I approach the game, but I had a lot of fun with that, and therefore it made it a much more enjoyable process once I started to do well with it, once I got the hang of it, and then of course getting some of the footage you'll see in the background. Outside of that, let's talk about one other one that is a little uncharacteristic for me, I think, simply because I like to be a little bit more aggressive in how I approach the game. Sometimes the situations don't call for that if people are spawning around me, and I know that if I step out, I'll get targeted by 3 people all at once. But another one that I think is another weapon that kind of makes you think about your engagements. You have to be a little bit more methodical with it, but when you approach it as such, you can be an absolute powerhouse, is that of the FAL. It's a single shot weapon. Yes, it is something that does have a decent damage profile, and landing the right shots can get you a 2-hit kill, which is absolutely fantastic. Definitely something you want to see in a semi-auto weapon, but even at range, it's something that does have some weight to it and some real power behind each shot. I think in the gameplay you're watching in the background, there's a point where somebody's head glitching up on top of the one roofs of Tovorsk, and I ended up two-shotting them at a severe long distance for the FAL, and of course, yes, they were headshots that we landed, but still, that fact that I can two-shot at that range, that TTK is pretty nice. So, of course, you're not going to be able to finish off a close quarters engagement with somebody that lands every shot of an MP5 or something like that, but given the right circumstances, given the right approach to the game, a little bit more passive, a little bit more methodical with how you approach its gunfight and the shots you take, if you're an accurate player and can think about these engagements logically about which ones you should and shouldn't challenge, I definitely recommend this one. I definitely think you can thrive pretty well with this, and it's something that, again, may take a slight tweaking and adjusting of your gameplay, but overall can work pretty well. So while previously I really wasn't looking forward to using this too much whenever it came down to trying to get some of these challenges done for the camos and working towards gold, ultimately platinum, and then Damascus, I've got a little bit more of an understanding how the weapon thrives and how to use it better, so shouldn't be too much of a hurdle at that point. Outside of that, we'll talk about 2 SMGs to round out this list here, ones that I think are absolutely fantastic, though when people think about SMGs in this game, they'll likely gravitate towards, again, either that MP5 with the 10mm rounds and the AUG with the 5.56 rounds. Those are fantastic, yes, but if you've already exhausted those, you've already gone through the challenges and ranked it all up, 2 weapons that could be a challenge but are fantastic once you master them are the PP Bison and the P90. Let's start with the PP Bison. Now, the Bison is one that, admittedly, I wouldn't take too much in terms of combat outside of close quarters situations. It's not an SMG like the MP5, like the AUG, like the MP7 that I would challenge mid-range gunfights or hell, even long-range gunfights. This is definitely one that I want if I'm up close and personal. I can, if I'm really feeling it, challenge something at a little bit more of a distance, but it's definitely something that will shred through enemies much closer, and you'll see that by the gameplay. It's a lot easier to use, it's a lot easier to manage, and with the right attachments, you can end up just dipping in and out of cover and, of course, snapping onto enemies in close quarters, or if you can't, of course, it's an SMG, so you can hip fire pretty well. This definitely gets way better as you put on attachments here with it, and it's definitely something I would recommend putting on attachments with, but for me, personally, whenever I started using this, I had that variant that had the classic Modern Warfare 2 paint job on it, so it came attached with a couple of attachments already, but it really wasn't anything out of the ordinary, nothing that really made it too great. So it was kind of the base weapon, but also kind of wasn't, so it really just came down to some different variations of playstyle. But ultimately, it is something that if you, again, think about it a little bit more, you don't rush right into it. It's not going to be like the MP5 where you can take out every single player in your path in a split second. It doesn't 2-shot, but it is something that 3 or 4 shots is still okay, and of course, with a higher round count per magazine, you end up having the ability to just tear through enemies if you just want to run a gauntlet or something like that. I definitely recommend running sleight of hand here on this. It makes reloading and getting back into the action way quicker and way easier, but that's just some personal preference. But I highly recommend it if you guys haven't checked it out. It's got a decent damage profile for an SMG, very mobile, and of course, with that high magazine ammo count, can't go wrong. And the final weapon we'll talk about today is one that I had an absolute blast with going for some footage here to get for you guys as of recently, that being the P90. Now, I don't know if you'll see all of the footage on screen at any point during this video. There might be some saved for a later date because I just have an excess of it and it won't all fit in this video. But to put it simply, the footage you'll be seeing in the background is part of a 3-streak set, if you will, where we ended up getting VTOLs and upper streaks 3 times in one game in a very short period of time, honestly, whenever you compare them. I think all 3 of these ended up happening towards the latter portion of the game and the match that we were in, but it was something I hadn't used the P90 really since around launch. But then I jumped in and started using it, and I think this was like the first or second game of using the P90, and it just immediately clicked again. It's such an easy weapon to use. It can do so much damage. It might not have the best damage profile comparative to, say, the MP5 or other SMGs, but when you end up taking that mobility that it has, that base ability to get around, you have that 50 rounds per default base magazine with 100 in reserve. You have so much ammo, and of course, if you run Scavenger, if you run anything that allows you, like an ammo box, to get more, you can end up just going on streak on streak on streak. It's just such a fantastic weapon in close quarters, just like the PP Bison, and even at range. If you end up mounting, it is something that you mitigate almost all recoil. At range, if you end up crouching or just are standing and shooting, it might be a little bit difficult to take out enemies out of distance, but up close and personal, where this and of course the PP Bison and other SMGs will naturally thrive, it is fantastic. It's one that I would highly recommend, and I had an absolute blast playing around with. So when it comes to the SMGs, I've already used a ton of the MP5, already used a ton of the AUG, the MP7. I'm really actually, I think, just going to work on getting these ones done and getting them completed for their gold and going towards that platinum and Damascus. I think that I'm just having such a good time with them that I'm not ready to give them up just yet. But ultimately, that's where we're at here at this one. That's 4 weapons that I definitely think you should try out and you can absolutely demolish with in-game. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Some of these may, of course, task you with changing your playstyle ever so slightly. But personally, I think that's okay when we're talking about not necessarily meta weapons. It's going to challenge you in some capacity. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Anything you would take away from this list, anything you would add to it, whatever it is, feel free to let me know your thoughts down there in the comment section down below. below. But hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Modern Warfare, updates, news, information, tips, tricks, all that good stuff. We got you covered here on the channel with any of that. So if you're interested, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. And if you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get connected from outside of YouTube. I live on both those. If you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. Well, let's send out of the way. Thank you guys all so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.